Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our next edition of our 49er Industry Chat. I am going to pause a second as we welcome our participants in today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at California State University, Long Beach. Thank you for joining us for this edition of our 49er Industry Chat. Before we start, I would like to let you know this session is being recorded and it will live on demand on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. For today's chat, I also encourage you to use our Q&A box located above or below your screen and submit any questions throughout our chat today. And now it's my honor to introduce our guest speaker for today. Scott Taylor is a civil engineer with Michael Baker International, Inc. in their Carlsbad office. Mr. Taylor received his BS from Cal Poly Pomona and his MS from Cal State Long Beach, both in civil engineering. He is an ASCE Fellow, a Diplomate in Water Resources Engineering, and is a registered professional engineer in 10 states. Mr. Taylor is the past chair of the National Academies Transportation Research Board Standing Committee on Stormwater, past chairman of the board of the California Stormwater Quality Association, and acting chair of the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance, a 501c3 entity dedicated to clean water for the nation. Mr. Taylor has 35 years of experience in stormwater management, water quality, and flood management. Joining us today to lead our today's 49er Industry Chat, please welcome Mr. Scott Taylor.
Hello, thank you, Naomi.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to talk about your career. But first, I would like to start off with, like I mentioned, you obtained your BS from Cal Poly Pomona, and then you came to the beach. So I just wanted to hear both experience. What was your experience like at Cal Poly Pomona, and why did you choose to go there? And then coming to Cal State Long Beach, and what was that experience like?
Great. Well, I started actually at a community college. So I thought it was a good way to kind of inexpensively get my GE out of the way. So that served me really well. And then I went into Cal Poly Pomona at, I think, 1981. And I went there because it just they have a really good, at least at the time, and I think they still do have a really good civil engineering program. I mean, it was really, in terms of California schools, kind of there. Santa Luis has a really good civil program now, but it wasn't quite as good, in the early 80s as Pomona's. And then, Berkeley had a really good program too, but I kind of wanted to live cheaper and closer to home. So I went to Cal Poly Pomona. Had a great experience there. I thought I really got a really good education. Thing that I really love about the Cal Polys is that it's practical, it's grounded. You get, a lot of labs, and a lot of the instructors are people that have been or are currently in industry. So it was just, it was fun. And I thought my education was really, really spot on for what I needed once I got out. And then I got hired through a private consulting firm out of Cal Poly's Career Day. And so that was great. They were in Newport Beach, and I started into water. That was kind of the slot that they had open for me. And I liked water. I mean, one of the things that I learned in school was if you're very precise, that you want to do really precise calculations, go into structures. But if you are kind of more, like to be a little more approximate, water's great, because you don't do things down to the 100th decimal place in water. It's a little more approximate. So that suited me. And as just like after a year, that was I guess 84. And right about a year after I started working full time, it was actually my boss at the time, who has taught for a long time at Cal Poly as adjunct person. I don't know if you guys know him, Bruce Phillips. Anyway, Bruce, like I said, he's taught quite a few classes at Long Beach in water. And he said, well, why don't you go get your master's? And I kind of looked at him at first and I was like, are you insane? I just got out of school. I'm tired of school. I don't want to go back to school. Then a week later, I just thought, you know, he's probably right.
Right.
And I think that's true now. Just it's kind of like there's a new paradigm. I don't think that you can just go to school and then have a career anymore. I mean, technology is changing so quickly now and stuff. I think the new model is you have to kind of go to school forever, you know, over your entire career.
Yeah, that continued education and certifications, which I want to get into. But before we move on, you know, you talk about you have your boss, former faculty member of Long Beach, encouraging you to go to graduate school. How important, you know, back then and even now is it to talk to your faculty members and find a mentor that kind of helps you also navigate or explore what you might like for the future?
That's really important. You know, the one of the instructors at the time that was in the civil engineering program, and the reason I went to Long Beach, two reasons I went to Long Beach. Number one, that you could go in the evening, which was great. I mean, I think the classes, it's kind of grueling, but 7 to 10 and once a week. So, you know, you could knock out like 2 classes. And then the other thing was they had a guy there who was really a giant in civil engineering, Dr. Gamal Mustafa. He was the chief engineer of the Aswan High Dam in Egypt, and you know, in the cabinet of the Egyptian government for many years, and then was a professor at Long Beach. And so he was just one of the reasons that I really wanted to go there. And he actually was my mentor. You know, he helped me out, and then actually became a consultant for us at our consulting firm. And we started a PE license review course. He kind of led it, and I was one of the instructors. So had a lot of good years, and it was just really great to have a guy like that had so much experience mentor me in water, and such a giant in the field. It was just an honor.
How amazing, you know, that you continued that relationship past you graduating, and he served as your mentor and helped you develop that program. You know, talk about certifications. I know you have many certifications, you know, for a student that might be thinking civil engineering might be their future, you know, what recommendations do you have for them to pursue certifications once they're done with school or during their time? Is that something they should pursue and just start to think about now?
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of, you know, it's a corollary to what I already mentioned about you got to keep going to school, and it's a way to differentiate yourself, you know, and also civil engineering has a lot of specialties. So you want to, again, that's a way to differentiate yourself, but also be, you know, technically current and astute. I mean, in school, for sure, get your EIT. If you're going to be a civil engineer, you absolutely have to get your professional registration. You will be held back if you never get your professional registration through the state. And the first step in that is the EIT, the engineer in training. So, and you're never going to be more versed in what is on that test than when you're like at your junior or senior level in engineering school. So for sure, take your EIT while you're at Long Beach. And then, you know, a couple years after that, you'll have enough work experience, and then you got to jump in and take the PE. And I would recommend taking a PE review course. I should know this. I'm not sure if Long Beach still has theirs. It actually, I guess it didn't. They transferred it down. It was Chillicothe, I think, is running it in Irvine. But take a PE review course and for sure get registered. And then, yeah, start looking for other certifications in your field of study. There's a lot of them, and they just show that you're, you know, competent in that area or that line. It's a differentiator to put on your resume, and it helps you maintain your education too, because a lot of them require, you know, a certain amount of professional development hours to maintain them. I'm a fellow with ASCE. That's something that, if you're working within the American Society of Civil Engineers for a long time, your local chapter will recommend you. And so that's kind of an honorary title. And then I'm also a diplomate in water resources. That's also through ASCE. And that one's a little more technical. You need to have at least a master's degree, and you go through an interview with a panel of your peers. So it's a kind of a quasi-technical designation. But yeah, I mean, I think you need to pursue all those potential certifications and things that are in your area, in your field. Absolutely.
What does ASCE Fellow do? What does it stand for?
Again, it's mostly an honorary thing.
Okay.
It just means that you've achieved a certain milestone in your career. I should be able to, but I can't recite all of the qualifications. You have to be a member of ASCE for a certain number of years, I believe. And then, like I say, you have to be nominated by your local ASCE chapter. But yeah, it just means that you've risen to a certain level and given back in your profession. I spent some time working at the chapter level at the ASCE, and actually had written several articles for ASCE magazine, things like that. So it's mostly a recognition, and it's good because it's not, I don't know, maybe very, 1 in 50 engineers are a fellow, something like that. So it's a nice recognition.
It's a nice distinction
Yeah.
for you to have. Congratulations. A little bit about, so Mike Baker International, you've been with the company for many years. Did you intend to be with them and grow with the company when you joined them, or it just kind of like happened?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how to, since it's the only thing I've done, it's hard one to answer. I would say that, I'm not the kind of person that would want to just jump around. I want to try to grow. And I actually started out at RBF Consulting, which was a small privately held company, and actually moved up through the ranks there and became a stockholder. But then in 2010, we sold to Michael Baker International, RBF did. So it was bought out. And at that time, Michael Baker was a publicly traded company. And then one of the members of the board of that company actually took it back private. So now Baker's a private company again. So strictly speaking, I've had 2 jobs, I guess, but we were acquired, we were bought, which is not uncommon in the consulting industry. Firms, if they're privately held and they grow, they become takeover targets, for bigger companies that want to expand their footprint or their capabilities or things like that. But, I've always gotten a lot of autonomy at this company, which is something I value. If you want to be kind of entrepreneurial and grow your own practice and things, I've been allowed to do that. So I never really had any reason to leave. It's worked out well for me that way. So if you're, how you like to do business meshes with your company, I'd recommend staying. I think there's a lot of rewards for that, but I wouldn't hesitate to leave if it doesn't, or things change. And, it's all about growth, right? Personal growth.
Right, and you're the perfect example of that you're able to grow within a company,
Yeah.
You don't have to hop around, and it's okay. So yeah, I'm getting some questions coming in. You're a professional engineer in 10 states. Did you pick the states? Were the states if you've done work in those states, and should you be an engineer? Should you be an engineer in other states? Could you be?
Yeah, it's all of that's been really driven by, our company and doing work elsewhere. If you're going to do work in other states, you have to be registered in that state generally. You can't, sign or stamp plans or a report without it. And it's not horrible, but it's kind of painful to get registered in other states. So it's not something you just do on a whim, to have it. You have to get, this big records request and have letters of recommendation from your peers and, a lot of that kind of stuff. But so yeah, I'm mostly registered in a lot of the states around California because, we've done a lot of work in Arizona and Nevada and Oregon and Washington particularly. If you are leading a project there, yeah, you have to be registered. So, but it's through a process called reciprocity. If you're registered in California, you can pretty much get just reciprocity, which means you don't have to take any tests or anything in virtually every other state, because California has a pretty, I'd say, the most difficult, registration process in the country, because we have a California special exam and the national exam.
And your professional engineering license, does that cover all 50 states then?
No. You can only practice in the state you're registered. That's why you have to get registered in other states, yeah.
Okay.
But the exam, like I said, there's 2 exams in California. California Special Exam, which is seismic and surveying, and then the General Civil Engineering Principles, and that's common to all 50 states. But you have to take 2 tests in California, so that's why you can pretty much go anywhere else.
Well, now switching gears and diving in a little bit more on the topic of your talk today, the flood management, stormwater, and water quality. Why is flood management important and how can it be improved?
Good question. Well, it's important because it's one of those fundamental things to preserve life, right? If we didn't have good flood management, every time it rained, you'd be up to your lower lip in water and it wouldn't be good. It's a real dynamic time in our industry just because of climate change. And, flood management used to be based on this principle called stationarity, where we assumed, in other words, what happened in the past was going to happen in the future. So everything in hydrology, predicting rainfall and predicting runoff rates is all based on looking at history and then projecting it forward. And what we're finding now is that's probably not going to cut it going forward because of climate change and the storms. They're becoming more intense and spaced farther apart sometimes. Like in California, we have a drought now, but then when a storm does come, it's much more intense. So the whole mindset used to be we would construct these works to withstand generally 100-year storm, a storm that occurs once every 100 years. So big channels and things like that. Or for dams, it's more like once in 1,000 years, say. But now we're starting to revisit that and look at it and say, look, we just have to design things that are more resilient. So what that means is maybe we're going to allow some flooding, but once the flood recedes, there's not going to be that much damage, or it's very quick to repair the damage. So in other words, a bridge may not survive the new 100-year flood, and it may overtop and have to be closed for a few hours. But then when it reopens, it's not going to be damaged because it was designed to be overtopped. Or, parking lots like at Long Beach, they may flood and they may be under a foot of water for a couple hours. Then a couple hours later, it's dry and everything's working again. So that type of resilient infrastructure design is where it's heading now, and not trying to just build things that are going to hold back the biggest storm that we can think of or anticipate, because we're finding we can't anticipate the biggest storm anymore. It's changing and we don't know what it's going to be.
So does that, as people build and infrastructure, gets bigger, is that going to change how they build things and the materials they build with, to know that maybe one day a bridge might be flooded and once it dries out, it would be structurally okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're spot on with that question. It's so you want to have, like, for example, for a resilient design, you want to have locally sourced and available materials, because if there is damage or you need to repair something, you don't want to have to wait 6 months for it to be shipped in, right? You want it to be locally available. You also want the equipment and skill set of the people that maintain it to be available locally. And so again, you're going to want the local skills within, say, Caltrans, for example, to be able to come in and very quickly repair that bridge. So yeah, it's about focusing on things that can recover quickly using local materials and local resources. That's the new kind of focus and model now on building infrastructure.
How does stormwater runoff affect the water quality? And how does that affect your job?
That's huge. I mean, that's one of the main things that I do. And, you know, according to the EPA, stormwater runoff now is the biggest pollution problem for water in the US. It used to be absolutely without a doubt, you know, sewage. We had a lot of sewage treatment plants just were not, well, they weren't very good. They were primary treatment and they released into rivers, and we had a lot of sanitary quality issues. But pretty much now all the sewage treatment plants are well operated and have tertiary treatment, so it's all good. And really what we're left with now is stormwater systems which don't treat. Most of the stormwater systems, particularly on older development, you know, the water just runs off the street or off the parking lot into a pipe, into a channel, and into the ocean. And there's a lot of pollution in the stormwater that gets picked up along the way. I mean, as rain is falling, it picks up pollution. And then once it runs over surfaces, it picks up pollution. And so, yeah, we end up, you know, polluting our rivers, creeks, and the ocean. You know, Long Beach Harbor, LA Harbor, got some really big problems with, you know, a lot of historic legacy pollutants like organochlorines, and then just, you know, other heavy metals and nutrients and things like that. It's a big issue. So the biggest problem is that we don't really know how to fix it. As you can imagine, there's such a huge volume of water that comes off of surfaces, and it's so episodic and so quick that we can't capture it all and we can't treat it all. And so really the move now is looking at source control of trying to keep pollution from getting into stormwater in the first place. So that's everything from picking up your pet waste to looking at the wear products of tires and brake pads from cars, because those create pollutants, pesticides, herbicides, trying to do product substitution or eliminate those from getting into the environment so they don't pollute stormwater. It's a huge undertaking, and it's going to take, I mean, we're probably looking at another 50 years before we really have tackled the stormwater quality problem. So there's great job security if anybody wants to go into water quality right now.
Right. And many counties have like water treatment plants, right? That they're trying to clean the water, recycle and put it through. Like how important are those with that stormwater management?
Well, right now, I mean, like I said, stormwater is not treated. We have green infrastructure, which really just mostly infiltrates stormwater into the ground, into the groundwater table, which has its own problems because there's some things in stormwater that are very soluble and they'll just stay in the groundwater. So you're just polluting the groundwater. And then, but the treatment plants, mostly they take wastewater, sewage, and they treat it, and some of it's treated, you know, like Water Factory 21 in Orange County treats it and injects it back into the ground. So we use that to keep out seawater into the aquifer and also to draw water back out for potable use. The next big thing though is, and you're spot on with this, capturing some stormwater and running it through those plants. So that's yet to come. It's just one of the big problems in urban areas, as you can probably imagine, is storage. You know, it rains, you get all this water running off. Where do I put it? It's incredibly expensive to create storage for stormwater, but that's the next thing that we have to do. And then we'll meter that water back into those treatment plants. And ultimately, the answer for water is to use and reuse water locally. So in other words, we'll treat the sewage and we'll treat stormwater, and then you'll be drinking it. And it'll just go in a closed loop cycle like that. And the stormwater is important because it's kind of the makeup water, you know,
Right,
there's going to be losses. And so, but it'll be a closed loop for water. So we don't have to bring a bunch of water down from Northern California and things like that.
So, working in water, do you need to be current on environmental issues that impact our natural resources? And you mentioned EPA, like how do you keep abreast of the regulations?
Yeah, it's a great question. Conferences are one way for sure that I do, reading publications. There's a lot of good publications out there. The internet, being on blogs and chat groups and things like that, certainly good too. So there's a lot of different ways. And so however you like to get your information, that's what's great now about the internet, you can go get it in person, or if you think that's old school, a lot of the conferences now are allowing you to zoom in and just, get things. There's just, huge online libraries of papers that you can get on this stuff. So me personally, I was a kid of the 80s, so I like going to conferences, but yeah, there's no shortage of ways to do it, but it's a very important, like this theme that we have going through this whole thing is keep getting educated, because you're never, maybe that was the case in like the early part of the last century where you could just go to school and then you know everything you need to know and you work, but no longer.
No longer. I mean, think about LinkedIn. They have all those little certifications that you could skill up, it doesn't hurt to add that to your education. Can you talk about your efforts with the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance and efforts to keep communities tackle stormwater challenges to provide clean water for the nation?
Yeah, sure. Me and two other guys, one guy from Minnesota and one guy from Virginia, Arlington, Virginia, started this. It's a 501c3. And back in the 90s, essentially, late 80s, the EPA required cities to meet the requirements of the Clean Water Act for stormwater. So essentially they started, you have to get a permit to discharge stormwater from a city now. And that's what I've been working on. And like I just explained, it's a long road. But this nonprofit that we started is really to help cities and counties and towns comply with the Clean Water Act for their stormwater. There really wasn't a entity like that that would serve as kind of a single national voice back to EPA, because EPA is kind of making this program up as they go along. It's called the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. It's a permitting system. And, EPA doesn't know everything. And so really the people, the end users of the permit, the people that have to implement the permit are really the best ones to give feedback to EPA. But there was no national organization to kind of funnel that voice back to EPA. So when EPA would ask for an information request, they call it, they would get, thousands of letters from all across the country. And it was just kind of hard for them to sift through it and figure out what the general consensus was on a lot of issues. So that's what our organization is about, to try to be the singular voice back to EPA. And then also to serve as a vehicle for peer-to-peer exchanges. If some cities really got a handle on one element or a pollutant, then we can do technology transfer across the US for that. For example, the California Stormwater Quality Association has been a huge leader in stormwater quality, and they actually got a bill passed in California, and then Washington State followed suit to reduce the level of copper that's in vehicle brake pads, because they did a study and they found out that over half the copper in stormwater runoff was coming from vehicle brake pads, the wear. Every time you step on the brakes, you get that brake pad dust that's on your car tires. Well, that just goes out onto the roadway and gets washed off and goes into creeks. And so by, I think it's 2030, there's virtually going to be no copper in any brake pads sold in California. And so that's a way, that kind of the end users of the permits, right, are influencing the system and having this feedback. So a great success story.
Being advocate, for our environment is very important. Um, you've chaired and been involved with various industry associations. Is that personal interest beyond your work with Michael Baker, or does your work directly influence your involvement?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're intertwined. I mean, in any job, you have to have a good peer network, and you know, to be able to accomplish anything in our industry, you need to know people, and you need to be able to operate with a large peer network. So me and all these industry groups and things, it's a way to make those connections and meet those people. And so I've been really fortunate to be able to do that. And it's just a fantastic way to be able to understand everything that's going on in your particular niche, you know, in the industry, and then to be able to call on experts when you're, like, if you're putting a team together to go after a job, or, you know, trying to respond to an information request to EPA, you know, to write a letter or something. I know all these industry experts that I can call on. So it's a great way to go. I mean, that's definitely one thing I would recommend is collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. You know, you don't, in our industry, if you try to be like the smartest guy, the prima donna, you're going to hit a wall. You can't do much alone in our industry. So be collaborative, definitely.
Do you recommend that our students and our younger alumni join professional associations then to make sure that they start to build that network, as they move along in their careers?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're a civil engineer, the first one I would join is ASCE. You know, you can join before you become a registered engineer, you're an associate member. And then once you get registered, you're a member. And then there's a lot of water associations, like I chair the Stormwater Institute for the Water Environment Federation. So if you're a water person, WEF is a great nonprofit that you could join. But yeah, virtually every kind of niche of civil engineering has its own industry trade groups and professional organizations. And there's no better way to kickstart your career than by doing that and getting involved and pitching in.
So, you have vast expertise in your field, but as the vice president, how did you develop your leadership skills?
Great question. If you don't do anything else or take away anything else from this talk, it would be, I would say this, which is communication skills. I mean, I went into engineering because I liked, specifically civil engineering because I liked outdoors, and engineering because I was good in math, you know, and I thought, well, this is perfect. So, but the one thing I didn't understand is that communication skills are so important, because you're in a technical field, but you have to explain it and bring non-technical people along. And so a couple of things I'd say. Number one, if you're not a good writer, become a good writer. You know, take another English class, take a technical writing class. But if you know you're not a good writer, you should work on it. Don't shy away from that. And the second one, and probably even more important, is professional speaking and public speaking. I had no idea, none, as an engineer, that I was going to be required to do public speaking. And it's absolutely a huge part of the job. You know, as civil engineers, if you do any work for the government, you go through an interview process to get your contracts. So literally you go in and tell these people why you're the best person for the job. And so it's public speaking. And at conferences, you need to do technical papers, it's public speaking. So in order for you to become a leader in your organization, you absolutely have to have good communication skills. You can be the best technical guy out there and you're not going to be the leader, because those people are a dime a dozen. The guy that can do everybody can do the calculations, or you wouldn't be registered and everything. But the people that can do the calculations, and have good communication skills are the people that are going to excel. So take the public speaking class, take the extra English class, you know, double down on that stuff because it will pay huge dividends as you go forward.
And that's what I've learned doing these series, that engineers do have to have the communication skills. And you would have never thought, you would think you were behind the scenes, like you just said, doing the calculations, doing that work behind the scenes, and how important it is. Are there any additional skills that you think they should hone on other than writing and presenting well in school?
Networking, you know, we've already kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's one of them too. Like I say, collaboration. You can't know too many people. And then you do have to be technically good. I mean, I don't want to downplay that. So I would say in civil engineering now, I mean, you can become a general civil and you do a lot of, you know, probably like roadways and subdivisions and general land development. But if you want to go into water or structures, for example, or traffic, you're going to want to have specialty skills in that. And that usually means a master's degree. And then, you know, and like we talked about, in just indefinite continuing education. So any of those specialty areas, you're going to want to definitely invest in continuing in more education. Quick communication, that's the big one.
What does your day look like? Do you still go into the field for projects, or is it just more on the management side now for you?
Yeah, most of my day is talking on the phone and sending email. Glamorous, right? I mean, that's just, it is what it is. You know, for them to pay you more, you have to have a lot of people working under you, but I still go to the field, you know, 5 or 6 times a year. There's a big problem. Usually what it is somebody's getting sued, you know, and so there's a dispute like that, and you're hired by one of your clients that's getting sued to go out, and they need somebody with a lot of experience, you know, to do that. One of the things for sure as a civil engineer that's very gratifying is that you produce things and then they get built and they're there in the field for another 100 years or so. So you should always go out into the field and look at your project while it's being built, and then after it's done, even if nobody's paying you to do it, because you'll learn a lot that way, actually seeing it go in the ground as opposed to, you know, looking at it on the CAD screen.
As a manager now, what qualities and skills do you look for in the candidates that you bring onto your team?
You know what? It's really simple. I mean, I don't look for the guy that has the degree from, you know, a super splashy college. That, you know, may get you a little bit of interest, but really I'll tell you, humility is huge, because people that aren't humble aren't going to be collaborative. And like I already said, our business, you have to be collaborative. So humility is a big one. Perseverance is another one. I mean, you want somebody that is going to, no matter what, persevere. And that's because engineering is all about doing stuff that you haven't done before. So, you know, I don't want anybody to ever come in and say, oh, well, I've never done that. I want you to come in and say, great, I've never done that. How do I get started? Point me in the right direction.
Great.
So that's what I'm looking for. And then if they have perseverance, they're going to be off, and they're going to be a self-starter like that. Yeah, engineering is not a profession if you want to have 1 year of experience for 35 years. You're always doing stuff you haven't done before. You're problem solving. That's what it's all about. And So you want those kind of people, and you can't effectively problem solve if you're working in your own little, if you're an island, you know.
Yeah. As we live through this pandemic, what do you foresee being the biggest change or adjustment in your industry?
Well, I mean, it's remote work. I mean, it was, I would say 4 years ago, if you asked, everybody in the engineering community, can engineers work remotely? Ah, no way. No. It's two, you got to be there looking over the draftsman's shoulder. It's collaborative, blah, blah, wrong. Our company found, I think our company is making more money today than ever because, we aren't buying lunches and having lunch meetings and people aren't going to conferences and stuff. But, I think everybody understands now that the internet's good enough that I think offices were created so that people could collaborate. But now that we have the internet, you don't need it. Zoom like this is huge. We have a company intranet that you VPN into, and 15 years ago I would do that and like bring up a drawing and it would take 15 minutes. But now with fiber and stuff even to your house, you can work. It's quick. So we're going to see, I think, what they call hoteling.
Right.
I think that's where it's heading, where you'll come into the office 2 or 3 days a week. You're still going to have to manage people and meet with people face to face. That's going to be important, but it's so much more efficient to do things over Zoom. If you don't have to get in a car and drive to an office, that's saving most people an hour a day right there. And what we find out is that people are on, they'll be on during that time instead of driving doing nothing. So it's going to be more of this, and you have to get your skills and be comfortable with this.
Right.
You have to get the Zoom etiquette and understand how Zoom works and post things in the chat and all the other social cues and stuff that go along with it. That's going to be really important. So it's going to be this new hybrid. I mean, I mentioned interviews, right, and getting work. We're doing our interviews now over Zoom.
Right.
And that's huge because a lot of times the people on the other side, they just turn their cameras off. And so you're just presenting to nothing,
Right.
and you don't know, you have no social cues back. You don't know if you're hitting the mark or not. So anyway, it's a whole new skill set, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the future even for us as well.
Yeah.
Family work balance, what has worked for you over your career, and even now, like we're talking about hoteling and the change that's coming for how we work. Hopefully, people will have more time to spend with their families and at home and dive into activities that they couldn't pursue in the past because they were commuting.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's really a personal one. I mean, you have to figure that out for yourself. I would just say that if you don't achieve some sort of family work-life balance, you're blowing it. Because, at the end of your career, even if you were like the biggest guy and got all the certificates, there's no prize,
Right.
I think your prize is your family. So you got to definitely do that and allow for that. You're going to work a lot, especially when you're young. It's important. But one thing I would say is, I talked about, humility and perseverance and collaborative. If you're that person, you're going to succeed. And it's not going to matter if you worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, Those things are much more important than putting in 60-hour work weeks. Seriously. I mean, you have to put in a little more than 40, but you don't have to kill yourself. So it's more focused about, are you a team player and are you getting your stuff done, rather than are you cranking out the most work,
Right.
So, yeah.
Definitely. So I have two more questions. I know we're up against time. Are you registered in any states where it snows? How do your expertise need to adjust when consulting on structures where water issues become snow issues?
Yeah, I'm not. Alaska has this. They're the only other state I think that you have to take this other test or course or something to get registered. It's an Arctic engineering course, and it's because they deal with permafrost, and it's different for the foundations and for pipelines and things like that. You have a lot of thermal expansion and contraction in structures and things like that. So mostly I deal with winter is more about snowmelt. So in other words, for flood control systems and things, you get a bunch of water that's stored in the form of snow. And then if it gets hot really quick, that can all melt really quickly in your flood control systems. We do models to look at that eventuality, But in terms of the other aspects like structures, I don't. And again, I think Alaska is probably the main one that has things about that because of their permafrost.
So any final thoughts or words of wisdom you'd like to share with our current students and fellow alumni?
Definitely do what you like, because you're not going to put in the time necessary if you don't really like what you're doing. So if you find yourself out of school and you're doing roadway design and you hate it, switch. It's much easier to switch early on in your career than later, because what you want to do is keep building on your skill set. And then, like I talked about, communication, collaboration, do those things, be good at those things, and you're going to go far. Absolutely. We need people, technical people, that can explain what they're doing. It's as simple as that, because you have to explain it to people that are non-technical, to city councils, to city managers, to developers, to people that have money that are building the apartment complex or whatever. Those are money people for the most part usually, and you need to be able to explain why things have to be done the way they're done. So communication, collaboration, absolutely.
Before we go, I know you are on LinkedIn. Are you okay if alumni reach out to you to connect with you on LinkedIn? Or
Sure.
if, yeah, wonderful. Well, Scott, thank you so much. We've learned so much today about your career. Congratulations on having a very successful career. We're very proud to have you as part of our alumni family.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for watching. Please visit our website to learn about future chats like this or follow us on social media. We thank you for joining us today.